They had been on the streets all over Kenya since last week, expressing their dissatisfaction with the tax law, which would increase the price of everything from bread to diapers to internet data. Many drew comparisons with the country's president, who pledged to champion the working poor, but who also seems to have a weakness for expensive watches and runs a government dogged by corruption. But the challenges facing Kenya are broadly replicated across the continent. A cost of living crisis made worse by COVID and the war in Ukraine, a heavy debt burden and a largely unemployed younger generation. And it is Gen Z who have been most vocal about the government's plans. We'll hear more about their concerns in a moment. We'll look back at the day when largely peaceful protests turned deadly with our Africa correspondent, Yusra Al-Bagir, in a moment. But first, let's hear from the Kenyan President, William Ruto.
Most regrettably, today's attack on Kenya's constitutional order has resulted in the loss of lives, also destruction of property and desecration of institutions and emblems of our sovereignty. Today's events mark a critical turning point on how we respond to grave threats to our national security. I assure the nation that the government has mobilized all resources at the nation's disposal to ensure that a situation of this nature will not recur again at whatever cost.
President Ruto there. Well, let's bring in Yusra, who joins me live now. And Yusra, just take us back before we talk about the current situation. This has been going on for about a week, mostly led by young people. And their main concern is about these a finance bill, tax hikes. And really, they're saying it impacts the cost of living, which is already bad.
Exactly. And I think that the level of outrage we're seeing goes hand in hand with the fact that they're seeing government and government officials spend a lot of money on things that they don't believe really matter, things that aren't necessary. We did see weeks ago Kenyan President William Ruto travel on a state visit to President Biden in the US and Washington for the first trip to the US, state trip by an African president since 2008. And there's a lot of criticism about the fact that he traveled on a very expensive private jet. And there were reports that it cost $1.5 million. Now, President Ruto denied those reports. But again, with corruption cases happening frequently around governors who've been accused of kind of pillaging government funds, millions of dollars, I think people are outraged that they're being asked to practice restraint. They're being asked to basically give up their wages, which are already very, very low and are increasingly unable to afford them the lives that they need to survive. They don't understand why they are being called on to practice restraint when the government, they believe, does not practice restraint fiscally, but also the authorities don't practice restraint on the streets when they do go out to peacefully protest. Now, I think we should kind of go back to that statement by President Ruto. I think there was an expectation or a hope that he would quell tension, that he would call for restraint, but he's actually doubled down. He's deploying the military. He's essentially giving his forces carte blanche by calling these events treasonous, definitely putting forward a zero tolerance approach. And I don't think that that's really surprising when you look at William Ruto's track record. He was indicted by the ICC for in election violence in 2008 and 2007, 2008. And we covered the elections that brought him into power. And there were a lot of young people who actually voted for him. So it's very sad to see those young people disappointed, but also hurt by his reign.
Yeah, I mean, Yusra, he's also a man who, when he was elected in 2022, pledged to cut corruption. So, you know, this goes not just against what he's doing now and disappointed the young people by calling in the military, cracking down on these protesters, but he's also going against the very things that he promised.
Exactly, Yalda. He promised that young people would get more jobs. He positioned himself as a hustler. He called his followers the hustler nation. He made a real song and dance about the fact that he would bring much needed change to young people. And today it was a lot of unemployed young people were protesting against him. And when they stormed parliament, the vandalism was the show of their rage and betrayal. They feel betrayed by the Kenyan government today, and they feel even more betrayed now by the Kenyan president.
Okay, Yusra, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there. Next tonight, the story of a man behind some of the biggest security breaches in history, Julian Assange. The WikiLeaks founder could be a free man within hours after reaching a plea deal with the United States. American officials have wanted to extradite him from prison in London for years. It's been quite the saga, 14 years of legal battles. In a moment, we'll look more closely at how he found himself at the centre of a diplomatic storm. But first, our US correspondent James Matthews has this report.
It's been a long journey. 14 years on, freedom now beckons for Julian Assange. This was the charter flight that will end in the northern Mariana Islands. It's the US territory in the Pacific, where he plans to plead guilty in an American court and then walk free.
We've been so focused on actually getting him out of prison, and I think now is the time for him to rest and really recuperate, be with his family, and have a bit of a quiet life for a while, like we all deserve.
Julian Assange was behind the biggest data breach in US history. His organisation WikiLeaks stole US diplomatic cables and military files and put them online.
Come on, let us shoot.
They included video like this, an attack by US helicopters in Baghdad that killed a dozen people, including 2 Reuters employees. Supporters of Assange say he was a journalist, justifiably exposing truths. US authorities said he'd committed espionage and endangered lives. To avoid extradition to America, Assange sought asylum in London's Ecuadorian embassy until he was removed and taken to Belmarsh prison as the US pursuit of him continued. These are the court papers that should bring that to an end. He plans to plead guilty to 1 count of conspiring to disclose defence documents. Julian Assange had been facing 18 charges. Technically, a trial and conviction here in the United States could have resulted in a prison term of 175 years. Under the proposed plea deal, he'll be given 62 months, but he'll walk free, as that's time he's already served. Prominent in the effort to free the native Australian has been that country's Prime Minister. In its parliament, he welcomed the outcome.
Regardless of the views that people have about Mr Assange's activities, the case has dragged on for too long. There's nothing to be gained by his continued incarceration, and we want him brought home to Australia.
Julian Assange is due to make a Wednesday court appearance. He'll plead guilty to breaching the Espionage Act, and it will change his circumstances. From the headline maker at the heart of a hot story to the spy coming in from the cold. James Matthews, Sky News in Washington.
And I'm being told that Julian Assange's plane has just landed. I'm joined now by Jeffrey Robertson, Julian Assange's former legal advisor. Hi. Nice to see you. I mean, if all of this plan that's carefully choreographed, goes according to plan, Julian Assange will essentially be a free man.
It will. Of course, I've just got a little thought that maybe he'll plead not guilty and take everyone by surprise. But no, it's carefully choreographed, as you say. It's been done before. It's a way, it's not law, it's a way of avoiding diplomatic embarrassment because you have the person who's been in prison for ages, dying to get out, pleads guilty to an offence of which he's not guilty, but thereby, having spent so long in prison, he's got to be released and he goes home. So I think that will happen in a few hours' time, and I'm not quite sure what airline serves the Marianas Trench, but somehow they'll get him back to Australia.
Why now? Because this has been such a complex case that's gone on for so long.
Yeah.
So many countries and governments have been involved. Why this moment?
Well, the Pentagon has been hounding him. I spoke to Obama's one of his top people when I started acting for Julian, and he said, look, we don't want him because we'd have to prosecute the New York Times, which was publishing his material. But the Pentagon does. And the Pentagon usually gets its man, and they've been pursuing him up and down the High Court. And I think there were a number of factors that weighed in his favour. The Australian Prime Minister, who you saw as a supporter of the previous Conservative government, didn't lift a finger for him. Caroline Kennedy, the ambassador to Australia.
Yes.
She's a human rights lawyer, and I think she was significant. And, of course, the fact that the CIA is intelligent enough to realise that there's going to be a change of government. And so I think that fact plugged in, because for all the legal toing and froings, it's the government that decides at the end whether to extradite him. And I think the Tories generally do, and they couldn't be sure that a Labour government would do that.
So rather than facing the prospect of a Labour government, putting him on a plane, sending him back home to Australia,
yes,
you think that this deal was done to save face almost?
Well, that was probably the timing factor, but I think avoided, obviously, a diplomatic kerfuffle where Biden is facing an election, and you've got a new government, some of whom would support Assange. So I think that that was a factor in the timing.
Well, I'm going to keep you right here, Mr. Robertson, because we're going to, while you've done an extraordinary job explaining the case to us, we're just going to run a piece. And as we've been saying, America has long argued that the information released by WikiLeaks damaged national security. So what did it reveal, and was any of it put in danger as a result? I've been trying to find out. Have a look. Julian Assange, one of the most controversial whistleblowers of our time. It took 14 years for him to fight for his freedom, and now he's agreed to a deal with American authorities. So who exactly is Julian Assange, and what did he do? He's an Australian-born computer programmer who founded WikiLeaks, a non-profit organisation that publishes leaked materials. One of WikiLeaks' first major releases was in 2007. They published a manual which exposed the US military's policy in Guantanamo Bay. Guards kept some detainees from Red Cross inspectors, while new prisoners were held in solitary confinement ahead of interrogation. 3 years later, in 2010, WikiLeaks released thousands of classified documents from the United States government, including footage of US troops firing on and killing civilians and journalists during the Iraq War, and the private thoughts of America's top diplomats from across the globe. WikiLeaks also published hacked emails from both the Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, which affected the 2016 presidential race.
They want to distract us from WikiLeaks. It's been amazing what's coming out on WikiLeaks.
Washington issued a warrant for his arrest, claiming he endangered vulnerable sources across the world and aided the US's adversaries. Assange was also wanted by the Swedish authorities over allegations of rape and sexual assault charges, which were later dropped. The warrants forced Assange into self-imposed exile. He sought asylum in London's Ecuadorian embassy and stayed there for 7 years, occasionally appearing on the balcony to address the world.
Extradition without charge is not something that we expect from the rule of law in the United Kingdom.
He was eventually dragged out of the building after Ecuador revoked his asylum status in 2019. Assange was held in London's Belmarsh prison for 5 years.
US! UK! Hands off Assange!
In 2021, a UK court ruled that Assange could be extradited to the US, but earlier this year, he won the right to appeal that verdict. Now, US authorities have agreed to drop their demand for Assange to be extradited after reaching a plea deal with the WikiLeaks founder. Under the deal, he will plead guilty to one criminal charge and go free. It now looks like the long-running legal saga that spanned multiple continents is finally over. I'm just going to bring in Mr. Robertson. And I mean, as you know all too well, the accusation is that by releasing those classified military documents, lives were put at risk, including Afghans who were working for the Americans.
But it's never been proved. And indeed, when Chelsea Manning was dealt with, it was disavowed. But there is one important thing to remember. These documents, none of them were top secret. Top secret is the classification that American intelligence and diplomats have to use if their disclosure would put lives at risk. None of these documents was top secret. They were, in fact, documents that were available to 2 million soldiers, including one 22-year-old who was confused about his sexual identity and who was, it seems, the source. So I think that that is an accusation that, if made, it needs actual evidence because the evidence has not been forthcoming.
Mr. Robertson, I'm going to keep you right there and bring in our next guest, Larry Pfeiffer, former CIA Chief of Staff. Thank you very much, Mr. Pfeiffer, for joining us here on the programme. I just want to hear your reaction to everything you've been hearing on the programme. We know that Julian Assange is a divisive, controversial figure, but he is on his way home now, potentially, if all goes to plan, to
freedom.Absolutely. If he's watching television, welcome to an American territory. We hope you enjoy your short stay. The reaction. I ultimately believe that this plea agreement was the best resolution at this particular point in time to this particular case. As a 30-plus year intelligence professional, I would have loved nothing more than to have him come to America, stand in front of a judge and a jury, lay out all the evidence, have a jury adjudicate the case. And my hope was that he would have been convicted and spent some time in an American prison. But after 5 years in UK prison fighting extradition, multiple years in, self-exile, in essence, home arrest in the Ecuadorian embassy, the Justice Department in the United States decided that that was sufficient time served. So he is traveling to an American court right now. He will plead guilty. He will stand in front of a court and say that, yes, he did commit this crime, the crime being...
Because that is part of the deal. But I'm just speaking to, and I have been to Jeffrey Robertson, who represented Julian Assange. And he has said basically that the Biden administration threw the towel in because of the timing, given that, there is going to potentially be, if the election goes the way the polls are showing, a Labour government here. So why not act before a potential new Labour government does? That is what Mr. Robertson is saying.
Well, I am certain that there are a variety of circumstances that the President of the United States and that the Attorney General weighed as they made this decision, and those would have included the irritant that existed between the U.S. and the U.K. government, the irritant that existed between the U.S. and the Australian government, and other governments around the country, the antagonism that was created with regards to the issue of freedom of the press. All of these issues would have been weighed in addition to actual justice being served and the ideal being a continued protection of sources and methods around this classified material.
Do you think that he endangered any lives? Again, we've been speaking to Mr. Robertson, who says those documents were never classified. They were available to thousands of soldiers, including Chelsea Manning. That's how it landed with Julian Assange to begin with. So, there's no evidence that any lives were put into danger as a result.
So material is classified regardless of the level. I mean, the different levels suggest top secret, secret, confidential suggest the level of damage that could be done to United States national security by their inadvertent disclosure or advertent disclosure. So there clearly were sources or perhaps methods or tactics or techniques that were potentially disclosed through the just broad willy-nilly release of this material. In our justice system, it's not the responsibility of the United States government to prove in a court of law that damage has happened. They just have to prove that the individual has violated our laws, and the law being the inappropriate acquisition and dissemination of this classified material.
Okay, Larry Pfeiffer, thank you so much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Robertson, we're just speaking there to Larry Pfeiffer, former CIA Chief of Staff. You heard what he had to say. Your response?
Oh, well, he came up with no evidence, did he? He just said, talked about different levels of classification. The level of classification which must be used if there's any danger that disclosure will put a life at risk is top secret. And none of these documents were top secret. So there's no, I think Assange has been demonized for suspicion, but there is no evidence that he ever put a life at risk.
Jeffrey Robertson, thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. Well, stay with us because after the break, we will have more on a successful mission to the moon, this time by China. They've become the first country to ever bring back rocks and lunar soil from the dark side of the moon.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours, and we're going to take it back.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power.
Now, freedom!
There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes, torrential rain and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued with its ultimatum to the people of Ashkelon, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in. Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous. We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Welcome back. It's something we've talked about quite a lot on the show, space. You'll remember last month, China's lunar probe blasted off on a mission to the far side of the moon. Well, it's returned, this time with rocks, making the country the first to bring back samples from what's described as the planet's south pole. Our science and technology editor Tom Clark explains why this mission was so important.
Floating back to Earth, the first ever pieces of the moon's unexplored far side. As they thumped down on the Mongolian steppe, China not only achieved a scientific first, but confirmed its position as a space superpower. A point reinforced by the planting of a flag next to the smouldering capsule. Chang'e 6 was China's fourth consecutive uncrewed landing on the moon. The 3-ton probe, complete with roving camera platform, landed in a deep crater near the lunar south pole. Using a scoop and drill, it gathered lunar soil and rocks never before studied by human hands. Scientists visibly excited by what they might teach us.
This is fantastic. It's one of those dreams that you have as a kid, the far side of the moon that triggers a lot of imagination. Now, humanity will have the chance to see whether there is actually anything different on the other side with respect to we know of the composition of the moon soil.
Chang'e 6 was the most technically advanced of China's moon missions yet. Direct communication with the moon's far side is limited. Many of its key tasks were completed autonomously. Not just landing, but boosting its samples back into orbit before the ascender docked with a return vehicle, transferring the samples for their 230,000-mile journey back to Earth. China has plans for a robotic lunar base in partnership with Russia and others.
The Artemis generation,
a direct competitor to NASA's plans with its Artemis moon program, supported by its allies. And having brought back rocks, it's not a giant leap logistically to take humans, taikonauts, to the moon. A new space race is afoot. Tom Clark, Sky News.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim, after the break. A historic win for Afghanistan's men's cricket team in the T20 cricket tournament, but with women still banned by the Taliban from playing any sport, we'll discuss whether there should be a cause for celebration. Welcome back. Afghanistan's men's cricket team has made it to the semi-finals of the T20 World Cup for the first time after beating Bangladesh by 8 runs. Let's just take a look at the winning wicket taken by Naveen Al-Haq. Beat world number 2 Australia on Sunday by 21 runs in a shock defeat. Let's just take a look at the moment Gulbuddin Naib took the winning catch. But while the men's team is celebrating, female cricketers in Afghanistan are not. Women are banned from playing any sport in Afghanistan, and the national team was scrapped when the Taliban took power in 2021. No education, no sport, and no freedom. This is the reality of life for women and girls across Afghanistan. Not free to learn and not able to play is the grim reality for 50% of the population. Tonight, I want to talk to a fellow Afghan woman about this conflict, about the immense pride for one's country alongside a deep feeling of sadness for millions of girls and women. I'm joined now by acclaimed film director Sara Karimi, who fled from Kabul in 2021. Sara was the first woman to serve as General Director of the national organisation Afghan Film and now teaches at the National School of Cinema in Rome. Thank you so much, Sara John, for joining us here on the programme. I mean, this is bittersweet in many ways, isn't it? I mean, the Afghan men's team winning in this way, it is historic, it's unexpected, they were the underdog. It's extraordinary in many ways, an extraordinary story of success from sort of rags to riches where they are now. But there's also a darker underbelly when you think about Afghan girls and the fact that the Afghan cricket team, the female cricket team, was disbanded.
People of Afghanistan, Yalda John, have right now mixed feeling because from one hand, they really happy that the cricket team won because it is about Afghanistan. It is name of Afghanistan. It is raising like the flag of Afghanistan, the Republic time flag of Afghanistan. But in the same time, you know the reality of Afghanistan very well, that how is the situation? Girls cannot go to school, women cannot return to their workplaces, and there are almost more than 50 orders, Taliban orders, that they just strict women from any kind of activity. And also the sad thing is that unfortunately our winners are somehow are supported by the Taliban, and Taliban leaders, they using the name of cricket team to advocate for their own power and for their own popularity. So this is a kind of sad and in the same time mixed feeling for people of Afghanistan.
Yes, I saw the call that the foreign minister, the Taliban foreign minister, made to the captain of the team. Do you think the team, though, doesn't have a choice? These are now the people who are ruling the country, and this is the cricket team, the national cricket team. Do they have a choice but to take the call and respond?
I know that there are many justifications from those that they are so happy about this situation of winning these semifinals, that okay, they need to communicate with the Taliban, but let's be honest with ourselves, with the situation that women of Afghanistan are facing right now and people of Afghanistan are facing right now. Like when you are in communication with the Taliban, when you are taking pictures with them, when you are drinking tea with them, when you are somehow in contact with them, and also they broadcast and they show their meetings and their pictures. It is kind of normalization of the Taliban.
Is there a way of using their platform to perhaps put pressure so that women and girls can go to school, for example, or can participate in some of these sports if the more successful teams like the cricket team, for example, could do more, or the international?
I think it is when you have popularity and when you have kind of celebrity, and you need to use your power of popularity to advocate for girls' rights and for their rights to education. And I think that this cricket team, they should use this advantage that they have, and they somehow negotiate with the Taliban about the situation. But we see that they return to Afghanistan, they meet with them, but they never talk about the situation of women and girls, especially in Afghanistan. So this is the sad and bitter part of all this happiness that we are somehow celebrating, because when they are our heroes, when they are our champions, when they are our supporters, they need to be inside of people. And the life of Afghan people right now, it is in the most darkest time of the history of Afghanistan. So our criticism, my very personal criticism, is that you need to stand in the right side of the history. And the right side of the history is that not to be pro-Taliban, not to take a picture with them and to be in contact with them. They are popular. A lot of other sport women and artists and a lot of people, they are working right now outside of Afghanistan
to try and draw attention, to the issues. Sarah Karimi, always good to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We could see from those images of celebration in the Afghan capital that it was all men celebrating that win. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. After the break, we'll have the latest reaction from Wembley as England play against Slovenia in the Euros.
The Hajj pilgrimage itself, I think we were quite lucky just because we were cycling and travelling throughout the Middle East. We had a chance to accustom our bodies to the heat and the sun, the temperatures, and as we further went south, it did get really intense and a lot more humid, a lot more dry the further south you went. But we had the chance for our bodies to acclimatise, you can say, to the heat.
Once you get there, it's a lot of walking. You have to walk from a lot of different sites where you perform your pilgrimage rituals, and you're going back and forward from the mosque to you're staying in tents as well, and you're also on one of the nights you're just camping outside with no tent. I mean, it's hot enough to do so, you don't even need a tent. And you're just carrying the rituals. But I'd say over the course of the 6 days, me and Abdul actually walked. We never took any coaches. We were young and fit, so we actually walked the whole distance.
You've seen a lot of the elderly and mothers, especially, just from exhaustion. The Saudi ministry, they've actually set up a really good infrastructure for the pilgrims. It's all a pedestrian route, and they close the roads down as well because the sheer amount of people there. So there's a lot of people taking several different routes, but you see a lot of people just taking a seat, sitting down at the side of the pathway just from exhaustion. The biggest task out of the 5 days is Eid day itself. All of a sudden, you've got 24 miles to cover by walk. There's no means of transport at all, just because of the sheer number of pilgrims. The roads are closed. You can't get close to either the destination you're going to, because you're traveling to a number of destinations on Eid day to carry out the rituals, and you see a lot of pilgrims just taking a seat at the side of the pathway, and it's hard to muster the energy to get back up after you're suffering from heat exhaustion.
Welcome back. England are facing Slovenia this evening after qualifying for the final 16 of the Euro 2024. This is the scene in East London. Let's just have a look, where fans have just finished watching the match, and I'm told it's 0-0. So England has not scored. The game has just ended. Let's see if we can look at those images of the fans who no doubt remain quite disappointed. They were disappointed after that 1-1 draw with Denmark last week, and they face Slovenia in their final group game at the Euro 2024 tonight. And the score has just come in. It's 0-0. So the game has ended, and there are many disappointed fans. Let's just see if we can have a look at some of those images of fans who were left quite frustrated by the match this evening. There you go. You can see those images now of England fans. The game between England and Slovenia has just ended 0-0. So many disappointed fans this evening. Let's go straight to Sky's Daniel Henry, who joins me now from a fan zone by Wembley Stadium. And Daniel, no doubt fans there are quite disappointed. They were left disappointed after the game with Denmark and again tonight.
Well, we're here at Box Park Wembley, where thousands of fans are packed in to see England play Slovenia, expecting a win, and we've got to the end of the game and it's 0-0. England have qualified. It means they have got through to the last 16, but the face of the fan to my right, if you just take a look, Sanjay, we were talking just now, I mean, England are through to the last 16 of the Euros. That's good, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, you've got to look at it. It is good. We are through. We have been, in certain situations where we haven't gone through, so that's the good part of it. But performances are what wins you the tournament at the end of the day. At the end of the day, they've not performed. They've not performed today. They didn't perform last game. First half was good, but we just seem to drop off.
What's going on there? It's first half good, second half not good. That's the second time I've heard that in this tournament so far. What's going on?
Yeah, well, look, I've supported Southgate. In my opinion, I didn't think a lot of the issues were his fault, but it feels as if the team are going out in the second half without a plan. We saw sparks of certain things, sparks of moments from players, but it seems to be more from the players' ingenuity more than the actual, managers' patterns of play. I think that's the main thing that's gone wrong for us there, especially second half.
And just finally, because we're kind of running out of time now, I mean, we're not really sure who England are going to play in the next round, but what needs to change if England are going to make any progress here?
Look, I think it sort of reminds me, I wasn't born then, but you know, when we had the players like Scholes, we had Gerrard, we have Lampard, we tried to shoe fit them all into the team. And, you know, Foden, you know, player of the season, you know, if we're going to play him, he's got to play in the 10 or he's got to play on the right wing. Then we've got decisions to make. So we've got to put some plays in and we've got to put some other plays in.
Oh, all right, well, that's it. You know, England need to find a way to get these players together. And if they don't, then maybe it won't quite work out.
Daniel, thank you so much. Well, that's all for tonight's programme. The News at 10 is next with more on England's game with Slovenia. We're back again tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Thank you so much for watching. Good night for now.